Hello and welcome to Home Tech Adventure. Hopefully you're here because you want to learn how to make these Ethernet cable ends and make your own custom cables. We are going to cover that, and looking at the reviews on sites like Amazon for people that buy products for this, it's clear that a lot of people are having trouble and a lot of people are doing it apparently incorrectly because they're not being successful. I want you to be successful. So we're going to cover a whole bunch of topics, including connectors used, type of wire, type of tools that you're going to use, because yeah, it can take that much to be successful at this. At Home Tech Adventure, we give you the best tips and advice on using, maintaining, and working with the technology in your home. First of all, let's go over the wire that you're going to use. Now, the wire I have here is what's called plenum wire. It's made for in the wall, and it's made for going up and down walls, and also going across walls if you can do that. But that's what this is for, in-wall stuff. And it's the most generic type. This is what's called unshielded twisted pair, meaning there's no shielding on it. It's just a twisted pair to help the signal along. You can get shielded twisted pair, usually overall shielded twisted pair. You can even get individually shielded twisted pair. There's all kinds of variations. You probably don't need that unless you have a really noisy environment or something like that. And it gets more expensive and more complicated to do shielded things because the connectors too have to be shielded, and you have to put it into a shielded socket, and it has to be shielded all the way along. So it's very complicated. We're going to do the simple, just unshielded twisted pair. Now, plenum is what I would recommend for most uses. The plenum cable is fine if you're going to buy the cable in bulk. So there's two different ways. Let me get that cable up on the desk here. So all three of these were made from this spool of wire, and I just custom made the cable. Now this is a solid core wire, and there's a difference, and quite a bit of difference. Take a look at this photo and it shows you the difference in two different wires. The white one on the left is a solid core CAT6 wire, and it's a lot thicker than the stranded CAT5e wire on the right side. So you can see you need different tools and different connectors. Okay, now this spool here was how I made these cables. You can do that. You can buy a big spool like that. It gets kind of expensive, but it's not terribly expensive. But what you can also do if you want custom cables is just buy a real long regular cable. I believe this is a CAT5e, and it's 25 feet long. And what I could do is I could cut this up and make my own ends. Okay, you can do that. But as you saw, there's a big difference in the size. So you need to make sure you match the connector that you buy to the size wire that you have and the type of wire that you have. Okay, so we're going to just concentrate on the unshielded twisted pair, as I said, and that's what all of these are. You get into shield, it's going to be a lot more. They also have variable cable, direct bury cable, and stuff like that, outdoor cable. So the connectors are going to be different. You got to buy the connector for the type of wire that you're using. So we're going to do unshielded twisted pair. We're going to be concentrating on the CAT6. So we bought CAT6 connectors that are good for the size wire. This is 23 gauge cable here, solid core. So you buy the connector that is 23 gauge solid core capable. You have to look at those details, otherwise you're not going to get a good result. Okay, let me get rid of this. Now the tools you're going to need. You're going to need some kind of wire cutter. I got two different types here. Probably the side cutter is probably your most universal and the best one. That side cutter is probably the easiest one to work with. This one's okay, but it's not as good at cutting things off really clean and close to the other thing. So I like the side cutter better if you're going to buy one general purpose wire cutter. You're going to need something to strip off the outer jacket. You can see we got individual wires inside the cable here, but the outer jacket has to be stripped to get access to these, and you can't be cutting into the wires inside. So you need a wire stripper. Now I bought this one. It's adjusted. It's got a little blade in there with an adjustment, and I can adjust it for exactly the wire that I need to score the jacket and pull the jacket off without damaging the inner wires. You can do it with a utility knife. It is possible. Get a good sharp blade. Be real careful when you're stripping around, and you can score it with that and do it successfully, but you got to take a little bit of care to do that. Now, I have two different types of connectors. We got a two-piece connector, and I'll show you close-ups of these in a minute, so just hold on that. But a two-piece connector for a CAT6 23 gauge wire, which is what we're using. This one is a single-piece through connector for CAT6 23 gauge wire. So I've matched the type of connector with the type of cable that I have. So that's the first important piece. Now, why the 2-piece versus the 1-piece? Well, you'll see the difference. I'm going to make the cables and you'll kind of see the difference. This is the crimper for the 2-piece one. Okay, that's the crimper. And you know, just crimp down like that. This is the crimper for the 1-piece, and it has actually a blade to cut off the cable because it's a push-through one. Some 1-piece don't have the push-through, but this is made for the push-through ones. So a different crimper depending on if you have the regular or the push-through connector. And then you need something to test them. I highly recommend it, because when you make up a cable, you want to know at least it's wired correctly and it's got good continuity. So a cheap tester like this, and I got a link in the description for many of these tools and things. By the way, these links are not currently affiliate links, but maybe if the channel grows enough, I'll change them to affiliate links. And if I do, it will be clearly labeled in the description that they are affiliate links. Okay, so anyway, this tester, and I'll have a link for it in the description, it's really cheap. And it works really well. At least I've had good luck with it. So, you know, I've seen, you know, comments online or the reviews online. Some people have had these break, but honestly, it works fine for me. It's been working for quite a while. So I like that particular tester because it's so cheap and it works so well. So that's why I like that one. And I'll have a link in the description. We're actually making these 2 cables with these connectors, and let's get to that. I have just one more thing before we start actually making these cables, and that's the color order. There's the color order pattern to make sure the data travels through the cable correctly without errors or minimizing the chance of crosstalk and errors and stuff like that. And these orders are very specific. There is a TIA 568A and TIA 568B. Now, trueCable, which made the pass-through connectors that I'm going to show you, actually was nice enough to put the 2 patterns on the package. So let me show you a good representation of those patterns, and you can take a look. You can see that the 568A goes with the green stripe first, and I call it green stripe. Most people call it green-white. I just think stripe rolls off the tongue better and is less confusing and makes it easier for me to memorize, so I use green stripe. So the TIA 568A goes green stripe green, orange stripe blue, blue stripe orange, brown stripe brown. And the TIA 568B goes orange stripe orange, green stripe blue, blue stripe green, and brown stripe brown. Now you notice I did that second one a lot easier because I'm used to that. That's the one I really memorized. So that's what I usually use the 568B thing. Now, what we're going to be making here is what's called a straight through cable. And that means that you wire one end for A, you wire the other end for A, or you wire one end for B and the other end for B. You use the same wiring connection on each side. There is also what's called a crossover cable with A on one side and B on the other side. You don't normally need that with modern computers. It's not needed. It was needed with older computers when you connected up a computer directly to another computer without a switch or a router in between. Then you needed a crossover cable on the old computers. The new computers just automatically detect and handshake with each other, and they can use a straight through cable even with a direct connection. So crossover cables are almost extinct, but just be aware that you can create them. Just make A on one side and B on the other side for your color patterns, and you have yourself a crossover cable. Let's get to actually making these connectors. For this cable with the purple boot there, we're going to use the 2-piece connector, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, it's very important that you get this in the right orientation. With the gold pins up like this, you have to have the little ramp thing up on this. Let me see if I can show that to you. Let's see if I can get it to focus on there. There, you can see that. See that little ramp there? That little ramp, focus again. There we go. Okay, that little ramp has to go up into towards the gold pins. Okay, so you got to make sure you get that in the right connection. This slides on the wires before that. All right, let's start. We're going to have to strip the outer casing off of this. And like I said, you can use a utility knife if you're real careful in scoring this, not too deep, because you don't want to cut the inner things. But since I have this already adjusted, my cable cutter, it's got a set up here where it doesn't clamp down all the way. It's got an adjuster for that, and I've adjusted it for this cable. So I'm going to use that because it's much easier. So let's do that. One whip around and we got it done. We have to pull out all of these wires and we have to untwist all of them. But first we got to get rid of this plastic inner core. By the way, this little nylon thread here is for stripping more of the jacket off if you want to. You can do that. And, ooh, did I get it in the wrong spot? Yeah, there, that's better. I can cut more of it off that way. Okay, so let me cut that off with the side cutter here so that we don't have that plastic inner core. If you're doing CAT5, remember you will not have a plastic inner core generally on the CAT5 ones. It's just on the CAT6. We're just going to leave that little extra bit, isn't going to matter. So the CAT6 is what has the plastic inner core generally. And these are very thick cables. This is a 23 gauge and it's a true 23 gauge wire. So we're going to do untwisting and I'll speed this up a little bit. Once you get this untwisted, then you have to straighten each of these wires. Now normally you can just kind of wiggle them like this with your hand. This happens to be it's 23 gauge wire, so it's very thick. It's really hard to get it nice and straight with the hand. So what I do is I just use the handle of this thing, and usually that gets them a lot straighter, a lot quicker. So we'll speed the things up doing this a little bit. All right, that's all pretty straight. Now we're going to arrange them in order, and I like to start with the orange one over on this side on my left, because that's what the color order starts. So orange stripe orange, green stripe blue, lining these up, blue stripe green, and then brown stripe brown. That's the B order. That's the one that I'm using. That's one I tend to use. Okay, so there we go. So we're getting these all nice and straight. You want these really nice and straight, as good as you can get it. And then you hold them like this, and then you want to cut them. And it does help to cut these at a little bit of an angle. So I'm going to cut them at just a teeny bit of an angle there. And then you put this in, and remember you got to put the little wedgy part up, so you can kind of get you can feel it with your thumb. So I'm put the wedgy start up. You slip this on. You can see that well. You slip that on the connectors, and once it gets on there, you're good to go. Now you can verify right here. Orange stripe orange, green stripe blue, blue stripe green, brown stripe brown. So it's all verified. And then you slide this down as far as it'll go, and you don't have to be, don't do a Herculean effort or whatever, but slide it down pretty darn good on there. Okay, and that's good. And then you cut off the excess. You go right up with your side cutter to the edge of the connector, and you cut everything off, just like that. And then you put on the other connector. Remember, you got to go gold part up here to fit in the connector. So you go gold part up, you slide that in, and then you push it in as far as it'll go. So you push it a good solid push in there to get it nicely seated. Okay, so now that's seated. And then what you do is you take your crimper and you're going to put it in the crimp hole that's meant for the size that we're doing here. And that's the 8P one. So this is the crimper, and then you just clamp down on it. And what I like to do, push it down and then clamp down nice and snug, and then hold it. I like to hold it for about 10 seconds to let the plastic kind of, set in its new position. All right, and then you should be good. You should have a good connection, and you can see we got a good solid connection there. And then optional, if you had slid the boot on ahead of time, so if you want to use these boots, you slide them on ahead of time, and then you just slide the boot back up. I tend to use it without the boots because they fit better in the switches when you don't have the boots on them. But if you want to use the boot, because it does help with snags as you're pulling the wire out, if you got a bunch of tangled mess and you're pulling the wire out, it helps to not snag that little tab there. So the boots are optional. I put boots on this one just so you can see what it is. Lately I've tended to use it without the boots, but you do have a risk of breaking that little tab off then, and then it won't hold in the connector thing. So did we get a good connection? Let me get my tester out and let's test the cable. As you can see, I have both cables connected into my network tester. Now this is a super basic network cable tester. It tests continuity and it tests that you have things wired in the right order, and that's pretty much it, at least as far as I use it. That's good enough for home use, folks. If you want to get really sophisticated, get a professional or buy professional tools. You can do that. It costs an awful lot of money. Okay, did we pass? Yeah, we passed. And you can see that the wiring pattern is exactly the same, 1 through 8 on both sides. So I did it correctly, basically. I got it correctly wired. And we do have good continuity. It passed. So that's all there is to testing. Now, if you have a wire that's very long, you're not going to be able to put it into both things here. And so what you do, let's go back to the, oh, well, I hit the wrong button, didn't I? There we go. Nope, wrong button. Yep, okay, we'll just turn it off. Okay, well anyway, what you have is you have what's called the main and the loop back. You can see there's a main and there's a loop back there. So you always use the main, but the loop back is for the other piece. Let me grab that. So you can see here, this is the other piece, and this is the remote. So if you have a very long wire running through the house, you put one end of the wire into the main there, and you put the other end of the wire into this little piece here. I got it upside down. All right, and once you get it in there like that, you can do the exact same test. So let me just hit the test. We do the exact same test, and it goes through and does the exact same thing. It's just with the remote on it in place of the other one. And it beeps because it's close. And anyway, that's a function. But anyway, that's how you do the cable test. Let's go on to the second style of connector. The second style of connector that we're going to use is a one-piece connector. It's a push-through connector, and it uses a special crimper tool that actually has a cutting blade here that cuts off the excess wire because it's pushed through, and I'm going to show you that. The stripping and unwinding and straightening of the wires is the same as the other method, so I'm just going to go do that, and then I'll cut to the end there. Now that I have these all straightened out, let's put them in order, just like we did before. Orange stripe, orange. Green stripe, blue. Blue stripe, green. And then brown stripe, brown. Just like that, and get them nice and straight. Oops, got one that's switching positions there. Got to make sure they're in the correct position, correct orientation here. So that looks pretty good. So we got orange stripe, orange, green stripe, blue, blue stripe, green, brown stripe, brown. So let's cut this off, and this one you can just cut dead straight. It doesn't really matter. And then right after that, you put the connector on, just like before with the side up. You push it in, and then you got to kind of wiggle the jacket in sometimes, but anyway, if you take a look, that's how it goes in. So it just pushes right through the connector there. I'll make it so you guys can see that better. So that just pushes right through the connector, and then you kind of sometimes got to wiggle the jacket in, and you want to push it real tight, real snug. You can pull these. I usually don't. I usually just push on them, and it seems to do just fine. And then you want to cut these off. Now, sometimes what I do is I twist these on the end to help it cut, stay solid so that it cuts it off a little better. Sometimes it doesn't always cut these off perfectly well with the cutter here. So let's get the cutter out, and you put it in the proper orientation there. So that's how it looks going into the cutter. and then as you can see, it comes out the other side, and you'll see these wires will automatically be cut off. So we'll clamp down on that good and snug, and again, I like to hold it for about 10 seconds, good and snug, just to get the plastic a little chance to set in its new position. And then you pull it out, and it did cut all the wires off. It also has a little tiny extra bit of plastic that it shaved off. You guys probably can't see that, but little tiny extra bit of plastic, but that doesn't really matter. So there's our good connector, you know, good and solid on there. And again, the boot's optional. This time we have a green boot. Connectors are nice for color coding. I do have to say that, but you can number your wires too. If you get a little labeler, you can number your wires and stuff like that instead of getting color codes. But anyway, there you go. There is a good connector. Well, I think it's a good connector. I think I did a good job. Let's test it and see if we got a good connection with this. Let's get this in both sides. So get in that one, and oops, it flipped my machine over there. Okay, so there we go. Let's take a look here. Let's see if we can focus a little bit on that. There, that looks a little better focused. And turn it on. Wait for it to boot up, and then hit enter. This is a really cheap tester, but it does a good job as far as I can tell. It passed. Hey, we're good. Good to go. Hopefully now you have some idea of how to wire up the Ethernet cable ends with two different types of connectors. It might take a little bit of practice. It definitely took me a little practice before I got, you know, fairly good at it. And I'm not an expert by any means. I've done a fair amount of them, but certainly not a lot of them. I'm not like a data technician that's been doing this for, you know, 10 years or something like that every day. So I'm not that skilled, but I got enough skill to make quality cables. And hopefully you can get to there too. But keep in mind that you might have to practice. You might ruin a couple of cables, a couple of connectors, a couple of things wired incorrectly before you kind of get it down and you get it right. And that tester that I said that I recommended, I mean, seriously, that's worth its weight in gold, because then you can know right away, hey, I made a good cable, or oh, oops, I switched around a couple of wires and it didn't pass. So you cut the end off, you start over again, and you do it again. Okay, or you wire it up and you think, oh, I did it right, but it doesn't have continuity. You didn't get a good connection. Okay, try it again. You're gonna have to probably practice on this. Speaking of which, if you could write in the comments your experience with using connectors like this, and you know, your ideas, I would really appreciate that. Also, if you could please write comments onto what type of videos, what type of topics you'd like to see me cover in the future. I do read the comments, and I do try to accommodate you, but there are limits to what I'm capable of doing or what I'm willing to do in some cases. But anyway, put those comments in there, because that really helps out. Also, like and subscribe if you can, because then that will help me make more of these helpful videos. In any case, have fun on your own home tech adventure.